Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
I have a question for you because we never get the opportunity really, and it never occurs to me to ask, but you're the perfect person to ask because you are from another country, but yet you're in the same hemisphere, and our culture is so similar. But growing up in Canada, when you would watch your equivalent of History Channel, or when you watch historical documents about World War II in Canada, did you guys have a lot of Canadian heavy history, or were you watching the same, American produced stuff we were, learning about the Americans' contribution and less about the Canadian contribution? Was there a lot of productions growing up of talking about the Canadian stuff? Because we rarely see it here unless you're digging deep on some old History Channel stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly in school, and obviously your relatives, like my grandparents, having that. Now I imagine there's just so little of it, and they don't, one of the guys that was in Normandy with me, and I was in this small, it was St. Marie de Mall, in some store. You get a coffee and they had all books and memorabilia and stuff. And I found a patch. It was the first special services, right? So had USA on the top, Canada down the bottom. That was the first special service brigade. And a wonderful movie. I mean, not necessarily militarily accurate, but called The Devil's Brigade, that William Holden starred in. And to know, just to find a little piece like that about Canada, or when you go to Juneau and people, I wear my shirt, and there were, we went on the beach. I grabbed some sand for Don Williams. He was a Navy vet that was supposed to come with us on this trip, and he couldn't make it. So got him sand, put it in a bottle, his flag, and these reenactors come walking over, and I said, "Hey, do you want a picture with a Canadian on a Canadian beach?" And they were like, "Yeah, okay." And I walk over, and this one dude just looks at me and he goes, "This is what I get for being in the Pacific." But they go, "They just do that and stop." And I'm like, "Yep, yes, yeah. Andy Haldane? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm a Canadian on Juneau Beach with Spanish reenactors pretending to be Canadians." How wonderful is that?
Well known for being in a show that took place in the Pacific.
That's cool.
And this guy remembers me from an American HBO series. Like, that's incredible. That's just so wonderful.
That's cool.
I think at that point, that's a great segue for us to introduce Dennis Blocker. Dennis, meet Scott Gibson, Andy Haldane.
How's it going, sir? It's an honor to meet you.
No, the honor is mine. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming on, sir. Sorry, I was tardy. Scott, I was wondering, what's the premier book for Juneau Beach? Do you happen to know?
Oh man,
does I don't recall because it's been so long, but does Cornelius Ryan, does he hit on it pretty good in The Longest Day, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's not a lot, like the best Canadian Pierre Burton, his book about Vimy, of course, which is the First World War, and then there was one written, I think his name is Ed Broadbent. The 6 War Years, and it's not specifically about Juneau. It's just Canada's entire involvement back home and the war. Really, like, great narrative, talking with everybody and anybody about their experience being in the war. But there's just so little about Juneau, and funny, bringing some of the Americans over there that were on the trip with us and volunteers. A few of them said, "This is the nicest beach we've been to," but it's the beach town, and it's got the, fishing village to it and everything like that. But I mean, that whole area just got hammered to crap. So most of the buildings there are new, St. Mary-Glise, Carrington, all these other places. There's a lot of these churches that survive and everything. But at Juneau, they were all wiped out. So
has there been a concerted effort to get the stories from the guys through the years? We've got several archives, and it seems like every little museum has got their own little effort at preserving history, and the high schoolers, they get extra credit for interviewing World War II vets. And has there been any effort like that to really try and get the guys' stories before they passed?
not here. No, no, very much British Commonwealth. You know, I don't know what it is entirely. It's I mean, to me, really disappointing. I did a short film years ago called The 13th Mission, and it's one of the Canadians who awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. He was a mid gunner in a Lancaster, and the Lanc got shot down over France on the 13th Mission. He all the five in the front were able to bail out. A pilot put it on some kind of a glide. Basically, they got all out, and Andrew Minarski was about to bail at the back door, but the tail gunner couldn't get out of his turret because the oil for the hydraulics was all shot up, so he couldn't pivot out of there. So Andy walked through there through the fire and took an axe, and he was trying to turn the guy's turret, get him out of there, and couldn't. So the tail gunner just finally waves him off. Minarski gets to the door, he salutes him, parachutes out. He was found by the French resistance, but he was so burnt up, he died. The plane actually landed, hit ground, and the tail gunner's just in the back doing Hail Marys, but one of the wings clipped some trees, and that spun the plane, and it pivoted his turret, and he was able to bail out backwards onto the ground. And then the plane went, however far and blew up. The resistance found him. He made it back to England.
Oh my God.
5 or 6 months later, and he went to a pub in London. And who was at this pub but the five got the engineer, the pilot, the co-pilot.
My.
And he thought Minarski lived, and Minarski didn't. But I did this short, and it's supposed to be at the Juno Beach Center, but I called someone up there and I said, I want to visit with some people here, and do you know if this video is still playing there? And the person had no idea. And
man,
it's just the same, because there's so many great stories similar to everything in the US and British, and we just don't celebrate. There's nothing for D-Day here. Our Remembrance Day, Veterans Day is a bigger deal now, but it's still, I don't know. I mean, people I think the reason for remembering it is obviously to honor, but also to say this can very much happen again.
For sure.
This has been a Digital 410 production.